Project Orion Associate Game Director Pavel Sasko recently claimed that Cyberpunk 2077 was not dystopian enough after he made a number of visits to California cities such as Los Angeles and San Francisco, indicating that those cities are more dystopian than what you get in the game. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. If you also want to support the channel, consider becoming a member and hitting that join button. We have a number of options for you. So let's get into this here. Wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com. And Pavel Sasko is indeed the associate game director at CD Projekt Red. He's working on Project Orion, which is indeed the follow-up to Cyberpunk 2077. I think it's going to be another Cyberpunk game. Obviously, we don't have the official name for it. It's going by Project Orion right now, but it does seem like it is going to be within that Cyberpunk 2077 world, and it is kind of the sequel to Cyberpunk. And he did an appearance on CD Projekt Red's Answer Red podcast with a number of other CD Projekt Red executives. And they were discussing the company's expansion to Boston as they work on a follow-up to Cyberpunk 2077, codenamed Orion. Sasko announced this move to Boston back in 2022, saying, "I'm moving to Boston together with the core team responsible for Cyberpunk 2077 to establish new studio and be the foundation for the North American team." And basically, they kind of talk a little bit in this interview about how it's good for them to be in America because they're working on Cyberpunk, and Cyberpunk is set in America. And then they kind of talked about how there were like certain things in the game that kind of removed immersion, such as manhole covers that are different in Europe, specifically in Poland or Germany, than they are here in the United States. So let's take a listen to what he had to say here. Let's play this real quick.
Interesting. Like, I sometimes feel like I'm in a camera in some other reality and just observing and taking snapshots. Like, I remember us like traveling a couple times to LA, San Francisco when working on Cyberpunk, and then after we sort of did the game, we shipped it. And I did even more traveling now when I'm in the US. I see that we didn't push the envelope far enough in some places. For instance, like let's say the homeless crisis, and so on. Like, when I look at it, I'm like, we weren't like far enough in 77. We thought that we were like dystopian, but we just like touched the surface.
You're like, we had one.
There he goes. He literally says they were not dystopian enough. They just touched the surface, indicating that visiting those California cities, LA, San Francisco, were more dystopian than the actual Cyberpunk 2077 game. You literally cannot make this up. The real world America in California in 2024, 2023, when he was making these visits, maybe even earlier, is more dystopian than a game that is supposed to be in a dystopia. Just absolutely wild comments here. Calling out the United States of America, calling out California, calling out the leadership in Los Angeles and San Francisco for literally creating a real world dystopia. But it doesn't stop there. They continue here. So this guy here to the next one who's going to talk, his name is Dan Hernberg, I think. Hornberg? What is his name here? Let me scroll down real quick. Dan Hernberg, and he is an executive producer. He's also working on Project Orion.
Homeless person in a tent somewhere. Yes. Like, and an American's like, wow, that's like, that's nothing. Like, you need like a whole city, so it is very different in some of these areas where even when I played Cyberpunk, you kind of see these things like that. And you're like, wait, someone's like, oh, that's really bad. And you're like, no, that's barely scratching the surface of the differences.
Yeah.
So there's these subtle differences.
Exactly. We thought like, oh yeah, we are being edgy. With all that stuff. And I'm like, my walk to the train every day is more edgy sometimes.
This is damning. His walk to the train while he was in these California cities was more edgy than what they showed in Cyberpunk 2077. Wild stuff here. CD Projekt Red executives just bashing American cities for being run like garbage. And this homeless crisis is legitimately real. This is what CNN reported in July 2023. California has spent a stunning $17.5 billion trying to combat homelessness over just 4 years. But in the same time frame from 2018 to 2022, the state's homeless population actually grew. Half of all Americans living outside on the streets, federal data shows, live in California. In fact, the outlet claimed at the time that, quote, more than 170,000 unhoused people live in California alone. One can only imagine that that number has increased in 2024. It's absolute disastrous policies that California has implemented, leading to this homeless crisis. And the folks at CD Projekt Red are lampooning the state, lampooning the cities, claiming that they didn't even scratch the surface when it comes to how dystopian real world America is compared to their actual like fictional dystopia that they thought was a big dystopia in Cyberpunk 2077. They realized the real world is much more dystopian than what they even envisioned. Whew. Let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.